Hello, Augies Worldwide. I'm Dave Kassler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, here with another episode of Ask Dave. Today's question comes from Lee England, KD9SWA. And Lee has a question. He has a radio, it's an FT991, and he does not have an antenna analyzer. Now, he does have an SWR meter built into that radio, and he can use that if he wants to. Just like I always used to do, you take the SWR at various points in the band, transmitting just a little power, get the SWR, you set it to CW mode, you transmit, you can see the SWR, write it down, create your own graph, decide where the SWR minimum is, and then trim the antenna accordingly. If the SWR minimum is too low in the band, you can shorten the antenna. If it's too high in the band, you can slightly lengthen the antenna and make it come into tune. Now, he has a slightly different method that will work, and I'll read it here. First of all, he says nice things about my videos, my training videos, got his extra. He says he has the ASU FT991A. To get a ballpark SWR, I used my radio tuner to come up with a resonant SWR. I set my radio to the lowest power, 5 watts will do. Actually, you can do anything up to 50, because then if the radio absorbs 50 watts reflected power, it's 100. It's set up to do 100. Okay, used my radio tuner to come up with resonant SWR, set my radio to the lowest power and mic to about 10%, and then found the lowest frequency that the tuner would tune and the highest frequency that the tuner would tune. In between these two, I figured to be the bandwidth of the tunable portion of the radio, which is probably about the SWR3 in each band. And he averaged these two to find the lowest frequency to come up with what he would call a close resonant frequency. Then he shortened or lengthened his antenna accordingly. Now, does that work? Yes, it will work. Because then you find the range that your radio tunes. The middle of it would be the lowest SWR, approximately, keeping in mind that there's some non-linearities in how this thing works, but still, it's a pretty good idea. Now, you do have an SWR meter in your radio, and I would back up what you just did with readings taken, say, every 50 kilohertz across the band that you're trying to tune, and so that you can compare what you get by using this method with what you get by looking at the actual SWR. I suspect you could be up to 100 kilohertz off. I would go with the SWR readings, but your method is not wrong. I would say using the SWR meter might be a little better, but what you're doing is not wrong, and it does work. And if your radio will tune it, that's fine. And you get a fairly good idea. It should tune across the band if it's 40 meters up through 12 meters. Okay, it should tune across the band on most antennas. So that really is a very interesting way of doing it, and I thank you for sharing it with us. It's a very creative way of doing it, and it does work. It is not wrong. Yeah, it's nice to have an antenna analyzer, but until I had an antenna analyzer, I had an outboard SWR meter, and that's how I determined what the best frequency for the antenna was with that SWR meter, by taking readings across the band, jotting them down, making a plot, whatever. Okay, so when I did get my analyzer, which is this unit up here, I've got two analyzers I use regularly. This is the one made in Ukraine. It's the Rig Expert. Okay, it's very nice graphing function on that, and it's got you know, nice multicolored screen, does quite a few things. This right here is my MFJ 259B. They're up to the D model now. And this one is actually my go-to antenna analyzer, even though it's got to be at least 30 years old and works very, very well. This has to be plugged into separate power on here. And you connect your antenna here. It has many other functions on here, as does this. Okay, so these are two antenna tuners. They're all kind of expensive. This is over $200, closer to $300. The same with this right here. Okay, this is a much newer design. Like I said, out of Ukraine, Rig Expert. And you'll note the Ukrainian colors, kind of the blue and the yellow. But they both work really well. I would put on your list saving the money for an antenna analyzer. But in the meantime, don't forget that your radio does have an SWR meter in it. I don't know the FT991 real well, but I know that my 7300 here will create a graph of the SWR across the whole band. So that's a very handy thing to do, and you might look to see if your radio has a similar capability. So there you have it. If anybody watching would like to help support this channel financially, you may do so by going to dcasler.com/support. Also, if you'd like to participate in our monthly giveaway, find the instructions at dcasler.com/giveaway. And until we next meet, 73.